Okay, for our next stencil technique, we are going to use alcohol inks. These are, again, Tim Holtz Adirondack alcohol ink. This is Wild Plum. This is the little applicator that comes with it, some felt. This ink is really designed for glossy, non-porous surfaces, so using it on my art journal is actually not its intended use, but I still think it's pretty cool. So just put a couple drops and just kind of smudge it around in there. It's gonna seem like it's coloring your stencil as much as your page, but it's okay. Oh, kind of messy. I went pretty fast up here. I got a clearer impression. I'm gonna add, this is a different color. This is Current. I always try to keep these tightly capped because I just feel like the alcohol is going to evaporate if I don't. I don't know if they really will, but that's how I feel. Oh, a couple drops of both, and I'm going to just try it. So this time I'm kind of going all over, and then I'm going to go back in and start smudging. Now I get like more of a color gradient like that. This time, this is the alcohol blending solution. I'm just going to add a bit of this. I don't know what this will do, but I figured I'd try it. I'm going to go over where I already went and then down somewhere new and see if it does anything. I think that it's going to pick that color up a little bit, and yeah, it totally like lightens it out. So that's pretty cool. Kind of changed where I went over. This is light. You could also, this would probably work. Totally. You could drip. So you got like the drippy. I guess most of my techniques are messy, but that's because it's fun. Oh. That's what the alcohol inks will do for you. Now, I already set this up a couple pages back here. I wanted to show you the difference between like the distress stain and the alcohol ink. So distress stain, alcohol ink, and this is a bottle of water. If you spray, this is dry alcohol ink with the water, nothing will happen. I guess very slightly purpley, but not really. This is going to be a lot different, and I should be checking to make sure you can see what I'm doing. So alcohol ink, nothing. Distress stain, that is just going to pull the color down. So depending on the look that you want, that might influence whether or not you want to use like a distress stain versus an alcohol ink. I like both. But the fact that this is not water soluble means that maybe it's a little more flexible because you can keep adding to it. You could add paint on top of it. This, you can add paint on top of it, but it's going to start to smear and change the color. Okay, for this one I wanted to kind of demonstrate a subtractive technique. Instead of adding color, we're going to take it away. And so I have prepared this page with, it's already dry. At the top here, this dark purple is Adirondack color wash. In the middle we have just a watercolor paint, and then at the bottom we have distress stain. And so they're already dry, they're already prepped. I labeled over here. We're going to take our stencil, and this time this is just water. I'm going to spray just to get it wet, and we're just going to let that sit for like a minute. Not even a minute, actually. You'll start to see that the color is going to change. Probably like 30 seconds is plenty. You don't want to walk away and accidentally forget it, because if it dries, I don't think that you're going to get the effect that you want because you didn't take anything away. It will just look the same. Alright, that's probably long enough. I'm not really sure, but I bet that it's good. So now I'm just going to take a paper towel, I'm going to lay it on top, and I'm going to press into it. And I'm trying to pick up all of the wetness that was left. Okay. Alright, So it definitely works best with the color wash. So I'm going to try to bring this up. Hopefully you can see that okay. So what happened here is that it pulled away a lot of the color. If you let it sit longer, maybe it would take more of it, but I don't think it would get to the point that it's completely white. This is the watercolor paint, and it's way more subtle, but it's kind of a cool effect, if you can see that. And then this is the distress stain, and I might not have got enough water here, but here you can see it started to pull the color away. This, I bet if you kept doing it, you could probably get back to really close to white, if we tried it again. And in fact, why don't we do that and see what happens. I'm going to try to line it up, do the same thing. I'm just going to add, I'm just doing it on one side this time. It's definitely wetter. We'll see what that does. Just a couple of minutes. So you can see that repeating it, it's more smudgy, but definitely more intense all the way around. That's really cool. In fact, I really like that a lot. This is pretty new, and it makes me happy. Alright, so while we have this spread open, on this side, this is just pre-painted with acrylic craft paint, just this stuff here. I used a baby wipe, just smeared it on. So the next thing that I want to show you for stenciling is, this is acrylic modeling paste from Utrecht. Molding paste and modeling paste, I'm pretty sure, are the same thing, because I tried to figure out what the difference was. I think just some brands, some companies say molding, some say modeling. Same difference. It's this like thick white goo. And I use, this is just like an old gift card that I cut in half so that it would fit in there. And all we're gonna do, I mean, every stencil technique is the same general idea, which is that you're going to hold it in place and then add something. This time I got some of this goo, and I'm just going to rub it on. This you have a little more flexibility with, like if you go over it a couple of times, it's okay. And I'm okay with that. I'm going to pull it up. And now I have like these awesome white polka dots. You'll see I do this one a lot. I think it's really cool, and I love the effect of it. This takes kind of a while to dry. I noticed if I dry it with a heat gun, it will like do these giant, like it'll bubble up real big, which maybe you like that effect, maybe you don't. It's probably better to just let it dry as is. And you could tint the modeling paste, I'm pretty sure, because it's an acrylic medium, so you could put it in a little cup, stir in a little bit of color, and tint it. I haven't actually experimented with that, but I like it. You can kind of see here, it actually picked up some of the color that was probably on the stencil from the last thing I did, because I didn't clean it, even though I told you guys that you should clean it every time. So that's what happens if you don't clean your stencil. I kind of like that. But also, I'm trying to tilt this so you can see it. It gives like a dimensional, like these are three-dimensional like polka dots here, which is why like the modeling paste is really cool. So it gives you a three-dimensional effect. I love it. So, okay, now for the next one. Okay, so for our next technique, I thought along the same lines of the molding paste, modeling paste, we're gonna try gesso. I really like this. So regular old white gesso, mine's kind of thick. Some gesso is runnier than others. This is a giant tub of Liquitex Basics that I've had for like a million years or so. It's starting to go bad, but I'm just trying to use it up. So again, this is a little more forgiving. You can definitely keep going over it until you get it saturated the way you'd like, and pull it up. And you could definitely flip this over and make a reverse impression that way, but I am not going to do that because I already have plans for the other side. So I'm going to just clean this off a little bit. It would be better if I like stopped and went to the sink, then I wouldn't get it all over my hands. But, you know, whatever. Okay. Over here, we're gonna try black gesso. This is also Liquitex. I'm not really a brand snob. I just buy usually whatever's cheapest. At least with art supplies, like gesso, because I don't know if it really makes a difference. Gel medium, same thing. For this time, I'm gonna put, oh, that's probably way too much, but that's okay. Get that guy out of the way. This is a little liquidy, like more liquid, so I don't know if it's gonna give me as nice of a line, but we'll see. It might. I figured it was kind of probably gonna do that. If you have, I have like golden black gesso also somewhere, and that is a little bit thicker, so I think that'll give a nicer impression. You could always also, it might be cool, I'm not gonna do this for this, but you could mix the two together and maybe it would make the black a little thicker and more like a gray, and that might be an interesting thing to play with the texture. What I like about using the gesso is that it's kind of, you can see it has like the dimensional look to it, but it also has some tooth, so if you wanted to, what I mean by that is that when you paint with gesso and it dries, it's kind of grainy, and when you paint on top of it, it'll hold the paint, whereas like the modeling paste is very smooth, and we're going to actually compare the two in a little bit here, but the gesso, like, you can keep going on top of that as long as you don't mind that texture. Like, it's not going to be good to write over the whole page, so you could draw on each little bubble or something if you wanted to. So we're going to let that dry and I'll be back in a minute. So before I move on to the next page, I wanted to show you something cool if I can get it. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so what happens to gesso when you dry it with the heat gun, especially if the heat gun is like really close to the page, like, you know, like that. It'll start to bubble up, and the bubbles will stay there. And it's kind of a cool, like, I think it looks really cool, so I think that there are definitely fun possibilities. So that might be something you want to experiment with the next time that you use gesso. Acrylic paint will actually bubble up too, and so will the molding paste back here. But the gesso, it's like the most pronounced. But if you just dry it normally without trying to make the bubbles, it'll just be smooth like that. And then the black's like that. So we're gonna move to our next page. I thought it would be interesting to compare the difference between molding paste and gesso when painting after it's dry, so I'm gonna do that on this side. So same thing, my little credit card. I don't really know what kind of difference we'll see, but I would like to try it. And I definitely encourage you, like, start your own little journal like this and kind of experiment. And if you're the kind of person who really doesn't like to get messy, or you're worried you're gonna mess up, start a completely different journal that is gonna be your mess up journal, and like, don't worry about being perfect because you're just playing in this journal. It's all about seeing what happens when, like, ask a question and then figure out the answer. So right now I'm asking, what's the difference between the gesso and the modeling paste? I suspect that if I use watercolors, the gesso will hold it and the molding paste won't, but I don't really know if that's true, so we're gonna try it. So this is gesso now. You can see, at least I can see, definite difference in texture. The molding paste is definitely smoother, while the gesso is thicker and kind of grainy. And while we're at it, on the other side, I have another technique that I want to show you. And I'm not even going to worry too much about. Maybe I'll try to clean it a little bit. I think it's okay if I get a little bit. Alright, this time, gel medium. And this is a gloss gel medium. Hopefully you can see that. I'm losing my light, so I don't have the best lighting right now. Gloss gel. It's kind of thick. Same thing. Gonna dig in there with a credit card. If I can find my credit card. Where are you, credit card? There it is. Getting kind of low in here. Alright. Probably way more than I need. This dries clear, so I painted the background so that you'd be able to see it whenever it is dry. I mean, you can tell by the shiny, I guess, but... So... Alright. So we're going to let all of these dry, and we're going to come back and continue our experiment. Okay, so now that our gel medium has had a chance to dry, you can see that it's a very subtle but awesome effect. It's clear, it has a little texture. This just came from me not cleaning the stencil properly. Actually, this might not have been dry when I closed it. But anyway, you can see it's clear, which is a cool thing. So what I wanted to do over here, we're going to try first a watercolor paint. This is just a cheapo tube watercolor paint. And I'm just going to paint it across here. Okay, right now not really any difference. I don't know if doing this will make a difference or not. I guess there's not a significant difference between the two. I wonder if I left it to dry, if that would make a difference. So let's just go over that again. Alright, and then this is just acrylic craft paint. Okay, again, it doesn't really look much different, but we're going to let that dry and come back to it. Over here, again, I'm not really sure what this is going to do, but I thought it might be cool because it's protecting the color underneath. It definitely seems to be resisting it there, sorry if you can't see that. Acrylic paint too. Oh no, that's kind of interesting here. If you can see, on the white part I got some of the gel medium, and when I painted over it, I didn't even notice that it was there. When I painted over it, it made it more pronounced and noticeable. So that's kind of cool. So we're going to dry this and see if that makes any kind of difference. I'm just taking the baby wipe and I'm going to wipe across some of it. That's what I thought it might do. Still a little bit on the gesso, but not as easily up. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so one thing I noticed with the watercolor, came right off with the modeling paste, like no effort. Gesso kind of wants to come up for me, but requires a little bit more rubbing. This came right up. So it could be an effect that you use to your advantage. Like you could paint the background one color, put either the modeling paste if you want like the more opaque look, gel medium if you want a transparent look, paint over top of it, let it dry, and then wipe off the color from on top of the textured part that you made. And really that would work for any of these. Like if you rub at it, you can get the color off. So it could be an interesting effect that you could play with. Now, on to our next technique. Okay, for our next technique, colored pencils. So these are watercolor pencils, and you can use really any brand that you have. I've had these for many years. When I bought them, I didn't know they were watercolor pencils for a long time, really. Then when I learned about watercolor pencils, I was like, oh, that's what they're for. So you could outline and color in the shape, or you could just leave it outlined, which is what I'm going to do on these. And now I can add some water. This is something you might want to do. I mean, this would be definitely a great background technique. Kind of gives you the impression of the stencil. You're not going to get the shape to go away completely, but you can definitely like blend that color out to make it a more faded look. You could also try water-soluble oil pastels. Probably anything water soluble is going to be pretty cool. I haven't actually tried these with a stencil, so let's see how it works. We're going to do it down here. Oh, okay. So you could and then I thought combining the two might be interesting. Maybe not. Maybe it will be. Maybe it won't be. It's even more of a subtle stencil look. But again, something that might be fun to play with. You could also use just regular watercolor or regular regular colored pencils. So I like that. Okay, for our final technique, this is how you can use the stencils to start adding details on top of your pages. I know this is a blank page, but you can do this on an almost finished page to add some extra details. First thing, this is a Copic multi-liner pen. Any kind of pen that will write on whatever surface you're doing will work. So just trace the circles. Then you could doodle inside of these little shapes. I guess you could really doodle while you have the stencil in place. I guess it wouldn't make a whole bunch of a difference. This will make sure you stay in the lines, I guess. I don't usually worry too much about staying in the lines, but that could just be me. I guess if you were into Zentangles, this might be a good way to incorporate them in a different way. Or whatever. You get the idea. Like, you can doodle within the circles. You could use the trusty Sharpie poster paint marker. Just is kind of the same thing, but it's going to give you bolder lines. I could have done this while I had the stencil in place. I feel like once I have my lines, I don't really need the stencil anymore. So you could color it in, you could doodle. Alright, you get the idea. Another thing that's cool, and I'm going to use a bigger stencil for this. You can actually use this two different ways. You could just create a, like, trace around it and then write inside of it. Great words. Draw lines after you write. You could also trace it again, and this time do lines before you write. I ran out of space, but you get the idea. When I draw the lines before I write, I like to stretch the letters to fit what I wrote. I'll bring it up a little, see if you can see it better. You could do those wavy lines anywhere on a page, but they look particularly cool inside of a shape. Then the last thing you can do is you could just hold this in place and write inside of it, and then you'll have, so I'm